Listen carefully, because what I'm about to show you could change everything. What if the war in Ukraine doesn't stop at its borders? What if it spreads across Europe, even beyond? This isn't a prediction, it's a warning. Since 2022, Ukraine has stood at the center of Europe's biggest security crisis since the Cold War. NATO, the European Union, and Western powers threw their weight behind Kyiv. Rivers of military aid, economic sanctions, a unified stand. But as 2025 winds down, war analysts and intelligence agencies warn Russia might be aiming for more than just Ukraine. The war is entering a new phase, one where the front line blurs, borders shrink, and Europe's stability could shatter. Today, we trace three dangerous pathways that could take Europe from uneasy peace to all-out crisis. War exhaustion versus ambition. Russia is bleeding resources and manpower, but Kremlin's objectives have shifted. Analysts suggest Moscow may aim not just to occupy parts of Ukraine, but to destabilize the entire eastern flank of NATO. Hybrid warfare and sabotage. Since 2022, Europe has witnessed a rise in covert attacks, sabotage, cyber warfare, disinformation attributed to Russian intelligence. The so-called hybrid war makes it easier to strike without formal invasion. Testing NATO's resolve. Intelligence officials have warned that Russia may deliberately provoke NATO members near Ukraine to test Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause. If Russia's plan works, tomorrow's headlines might not be about Ukraine, but about Warsaw, Tallinn, or even Berlin. Here are some of the most vulnerable zones: Baltic states and Poland. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland border Russia or Belarus. Already, Russian drones or jets have violated airspace near the Baltics. Black Sea and Moldova region. With Odessa, Moldova's pro-Russian factions, and frozen conflicts, the south could erupt sooner than people expect. Hybrid front lines in Central and Western Europe. From cyber attacks on infrastructure, disinformation on social media, to sabotage of critical supply chains, the war may no longer look like tanks and missiles. It may come as blackouts, food shortages, or digital collapse. A war that began with artillery shells in Kyiv could end with power cuts in Paris, or worse. European nations still haven't formed a unified defense strategy. While some push for increased military budgets, others fear economic backlash, weapon fatigue, and economic strain. After years of supporting Ukraine, countries face domestic pressures: inflation, refugee crises, energy shortages. Long-term support may erode. In 2026, Europe might find itself fighting not for Ukraine, but for survival. Refugee Wave 2.0. Millions more Ukrainians fleeing west, straining housing, jobs, and public order in EU countries. Economic collapse and global supply shock. War zones intersect major food and energy routes. Europe, dependent on grain and gas, global ripple effects inevitable. NATO splitting and East versus West divide. Countries with direct Russian border exposure might push for peace, while others push for retaliation, risking alliance fracture. World War III, hybrid plus conventional combo. Not a typical WW2-style invasion, but a blended war. Cyber attacks, sabotage, proxy uprisings, destabilizing entire regions at once. This isn't fear-mongering. This is what think tanks and secret memos are warning about, and time is running out. New defense initiatives. Some European nations are pushing for a continent-wide air shield and drone defense collaboration to protect from missile and drone attacks. Stronger EU-Ukraine ties. EU recently approved multi-billion euro defense collaboration and institutional support for Ukraine, a sign that the war's outcome will shape Europe's future defense landscape. Political hesitation and internal debates. Not all EU members agree. Some fear provocation will trigger bigger war. Others believe Russia must be contained at all costs. If Europe fails to unite now, the peace it negotiates may just be a pause button, not the end. So, what if the Ukraine war spreads beyond borders? Then we're not just talking about a regional crisis, but a new European war. A war that could reshape alliances, redraw borders, and test the very idea of continental peace. But there's still a chance. If Europe and NATO act now, with unity, force, and resolve, they might stop the spark from becoming a wildfire. If you think this video was dramatic, watch the one we're releasing next week, because what they're planning behind closed doors may shock you. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe if you want to understand the world before it changes.